Good evening and welcome to the Way Out Show. I'm your host, Dane McCarthy, broadcasting to you from FEMA Region 5 deep in the bowels of the United Police State of Amnesia. Today is January 23rd, 2015, and there's a lot of talk about Iran. You've been hearing about Iran for 20 years at least, but the pressure is on. The fear-mongering is ramping up. A couple of days ago, the doomsday clock was moved forward once again, hasn't moved forward in several years, and now it's almost up to midnight, and of course midnight is the end of the world. And apparently the doomsday clock was started in 1947, right only a few months after the invention of the hydrogen bomb and the first test of the hydrogen bomb. The doomsday clock is a perfect propaganda tool to keep the level of fear in the American people and the people of the world really high. And we know, of course, by now that governments need this. They need to keep their populations under control. They need to have the people need them. If the people did not have constant fear in their lives, then they would begin to think that, things are pretty good around here. We have peace, we have prosperity, we have stability, we're trading with other countries, and everybody seems to be getting along pretty well. Why are we spending these billions and hundreds of billions of dollars and trillions of dollars on these gigantic standing armies? And why are they demanding these enormous surveillance grid technology, this high-tech weaponry? You know what? I think we need to cut back. I think we need to cut their budget, maybe way down, like way down, and use that money for something else. And just let people keep their money. So that is the number one reason why we have wars, why we have destabilization programs. It's really what the CIA does. They do that the best. They were created at the end of World War II because there was a need for an organization to protect the wealth of the people at the very top of the pyramid on planet Earth. And of course the Bush family was deeply involved right from the beginning with Prescott Bush and other American Nazis. And of course the Nazi philosophy and lifestyle and thought processes and mindset in the Bush family goes right through to George W. Bush and now into Jeb Bush, and we can look forward to a continuation of fascism that's getting more and more established in the United States of America. Really, it doesn't matter who's elected. They're all fascists, and they believe that they need to rule, they are right, and they know what's best for themselves. And indeed, they do know what's best for themselves. There's no argument there. What they don't tell you is that they don't know what's best for the American people, and they don't know because they've never looked into it, because they don't care what's best for the American people. They're not interested in the American people and never have been. They're only interested in the American people insofar as they have their support. And they will do anything and they will say anything in order to get the support of the American people. They will give them anything that they can in order to get their support, but it doesn't mean they really care. So people have to stop believing that our leaders care about us. They want to continue leading us, or ruling us, I should say, and therefore they need us insofar as we will provide them with the means to rule us, and they can use us insofar as they need us to protect them, protect their interests, and to expand their interests, and to buy their products. We're still at the point where the people at the very top, they have these enormous businesses, and they use their businesses, their ability to make products to sell us a bunch of junk that we mostly don't need, and also a bunch of stuff, junk that we think we need, because they use the media to influence our thinking from birth, from a very young age. As soon as you can sit as a toddler in front of a television set, you can sit up on your own and you can focus with your little eyes, your little 2-year-old or 1.5-year-old eyes on that TV. You become a target, and you are being programmed in order to become a cash cow, a source of income for the small group of people at the very top who run the show, who own the planet. And so therefore, in other words, we human beings generate wealth by our hard work, by our creativity, by our inventiveness, by our original thinking. Now these people, they don't have much original thinking. They're essentially incompetent sociopaths. And so how are they going to survive? They survive like any parasite survives, by sucking the lifeblood out of the other living beings that are independent and competent, creative thinkers. And this is the way it's always been. People say, but it's always been that way. Yes, that's true. It's always been that way. And so in other words, I'm not saying anything new, but that doesn't mean that you get to just put all this information into a little box and hide it somewhere and just forget about it because, well, it's always been that way. Even though it's always been that way, it's always also been true that there have been other people who have struggled against the 360-degree pressure that's put on the mind of men to enslave them. All the way from, I think of Spartacus. Now we think of Spartacus as a movie starring Kirk Douglas, a slave revolt. But in reality, Spartacus apparently was a real person and actually did lead a slave revolt that scared the bejesus out of the Roman Empire, because he just swept through the countryside and took all the slaves with him. They all ran away and joined this slave army. And they were eventually destroyed by the legions. But it's an amazing and inspiring story of human courage, true human courage. Now one thing, so because you have people who are underarmed, lacking armor, undereducated, they're not, most of them are probably farmers, they're not trained soldiers. But nevertheless, Spartacus, who was apparently a gladiator, trained as a gladiator, so he knew how to fight. he and his generals actually were able to win several battles, major battles, bloody battles, hand-to-hand combat against the legions before they were finally overwhelmed. They were betrayed. They wanted to leave the country completely, leave Italy completely. And they were, unfortunately, they were robbed. They had collected a huge treasure when they swept through Italy down to the southern coast, and because they would just run over whole areas and just grab up everything that they could, and that these pirates were going to help them from another country like the Middle East, I think, or Turkey or something. But then they made a deal. The pirates made a deal with the Romans, a back deal, a side deal, and so the slaves were trapped there, and they were most of them killed, and the ones who weren't killed, the women and children were sent back to slavery. The men were crucified all the way along the Appian Way for, I don't know, 20, 50, 100 miles on both sides all the way. So you had thousands of men crucified at the same time. So this is my understanding of the way the story went. And then we have a situation like today, in which Americans are supposedly fighting for our freedom and fighting for democracy, but in reality doing the complete opposite. And you have a movie like American Sniper, which is a tremendously popular film by Clint Eastwood, which just came out, and is a look at the war in Iraq, in the Middle East. And I hate to use the term war, actually, because it's really not a war at all. But it's more like an adventure for profit for the major multinational corporations and the world's richest people. But you have someone like Chris Kyle, who is now touted as this incredible hero. People were actually crying in the movie theater when I went to see the movie, and there was a reverent silence. As soon as the movie was done, it was completely reverent. It was like a holy moment where there was a hush. People didn't get up out of their seats, and somebody actually started to clap, and then nobody else joined in, so nobody clapped. But it was almost like everybody was just suddenly going to start clapping. And people are it was a well-made movie, no question about it. But was it true? No, it was not true. And Kyle, apparently, from what my understanding, actually divorced his wife, and it did not come out so well for him. And then he wasn't martyred in the end by a psycho fellow veteran. The chances are very good that he was actually executed by the U.S. government, by the military, like they have executed so many others, like, for instance, Pat Tillman. And you have to look at the Jessica Lynch story, too, which was they were both propaganda opportunities that failed miserably. Just look it up, Jessica Lynch, this heroic woman. The idea was to get her in a situation, use the situation that she was in which she was cowering in fear, and make her into a hero, shooting this machine gun, killing Iraqis. Actually, the Iraqis tried to help her because she was hurt, and then abandoned the hospital before the Americans came. And they were nice to her. They were kind to her. And so she went along with it for a little while with the myth-making that was going on by the Pentagon and the U.S. military and the government and the media to make her a hero. They wanted to make her a female American hero against the evil Iraqis. And she finally said, I've had enough. She came clean. She told the truth. She said it was all a lie, it was all a hoax, and she just vanished away from the scene and went back to the hills of Kentucky or Tennessee or wherever she was from. Said, I'm done. I'm out of here. Pat Tillman, amazing story. Guy turned down $1 million professional football offers, inspired by 9/11, decided to fight for America, joined up, realized after he got over there that it was a lie. The Americans were protecting the poppy fields, that bringing in the drugs from Afghanistan was a big part of the reason we were there, that it wasn't about protecting democracy or spreading democracy. It was pure aggression. It was an economic effort to gain control of Central Asia, which is, because that's what Afghanistan is, man. It is the center of Central Asia. It's the perfect headquarters landing zone to get control of the rest of Central Asia. It itself has trillions of dollars in untapped natural resources, and the other countries around them too. And their thinking is, if we don't get it, somebody else will, like Russia or China. But anyway, so you have the latest effort to make a hero, a true American hero, a sniper of all things, who is about the least heroic figure you could imagine, shooting people in cold blood, who, from a position of safety at a great distance. And in wars, in previous wars, snipers have not been considered to be heroes. There's always something dirty about that job, something cowardly, that it's attached to the job of being a sniper. In the past, I mean, you noticed, did Chris Kyle get the Congressional Medal of Honor? I don't think he did. I don't know of any awards. Maybe he did get some awards, I don't know, for killing the most people. But then he is killed on a firing range by a deranged veteran. This is what happened. He is now dead. But you always have to look for assassination in these situations. Look, it's very likely that people were discovering the truth, just like discovered the truth about Pat Tillman's death. He was killed, murdered, because he was about to turn against the whole program that he had joined, because he saw the truth. And he said, he wrote his family, and they probably read the letters. This is awful, this is wrong, I'm going to go back to America and talk about this. This is a guy with a high profile, a young, very handsome man who could have made a difference, and they got rid of him. They did the same thing with Chris Kyle. The whole thing. Now, Chris Kyle was gung-ho, but people were not believing him. He wrote that autobiography, or someone else wrote it for him or with him, and it was just, people just weren't buying it. It just wasn't happening. So they killed him. And that made him a martyr, that made him a hero, that made him a saint, and now that's where he stands. He's a dead hero. A dead hero is much safer than a live hero. Tyrannical governments particularly need heroes, and the best kind of hero is a dead hero, because you can say anything about them you want. You can raise them up to the level of sainthood. You can make them a shining star for the future generations to follow. The myth is untarnished by the misstatements or the cynicism of the so-called hero, who they tend to come back. They use, what happens with the hero is that he does something great maybe, but then he like says, it wasn't that great. You're saying I did this, but I didn't really do this. You're making too much of this. It's more than I did, and it's like you you don't want to be a hero. You're alive. If you're alive, you don't want to be a hero. If you're dead, you're just a tool, a perfect tool. So anyway, the Middle East. I have a short video here that I found. It's kind of funny, and it just sort of points up how fake this is. There's a new video out about two Japanese guys, and it is a and of course, this is also part of the big show that they're putting on for us. Because what do they want in Japan? They want to change Japanese opinion and get the Japanese more involved in the whole show, the whole game. They've been out of the picture militarily ever since the end of World War II. Their constitution forbids them from having an army. But they are slowly moving Japan to get back into the game. And this is one of the ways they're doing it. So we have, this is an example. Let's run that video.
I'm Joe Biggs with Infowars.com. Now, an article was released today by the Daily Sheeple, and the headline is the ISIS Japanese beheading video green screened or what? People aren't buying it. Well, let's go ahead and take a look into this article. What they're saying so far is that they believe that this is a fake green screen video. And the main reason for that, if you look at the Japanese man who is on his knees to the left side, the shadow is on the inside of his neck. Then the other man to the left of him is on the exact same side. So that would show that there are two different suns in the sky bringing in two different shadows. So that is something obviously pretty sketchy with that. But most people are thinking that, like I said, that this is just too far-fetched. You have a shadow going down. There's a light, it looks like, that's on the right side of the shoulder of the man, which makes the sun direction change. Also, the eyes of Johnny Jihad look a little odd as well, like they've been closed the entire time. And then when he turns sideways a bit, you can see a pixelated part of his man dress going down the side. So it's definitely something to look into, but most people are thinking it is a fake video. All the videos we've seen thus far look pretty fake. We've been questioning it for some time. What we want to do is just point out the fact that this does look a bit sketchy. They've already said that they've picked up a lot of ISIS supporters who are in America. You know, so these kind of guys would probably have the tools to be able to edit a video like that. And it looks like this time on this video, they've kind of lost their touch. So we're going to take a look at a different video and show you how easy it would be to possibly set something up like this.
For all you Westerners that will be watching this, this is American journalist Josh Owens of Infowars.com. All he does is spread lies about the ISIS caliphate.
Start over.
What's wrong? I'm trying to look like I'm in a desert. How else would these stupid Americans believe what is going on if you can't get the f***ing lights right? I'm tired of reading the Daily Sheeple and Fox News and all this saying, oh, ISIS can't even make a real video. I'm trying to get into character.
You look like a woman. The women cover their faces up.
Okay, why don't you watch the video of the guy and tell me what you see. Hold this a second.
Holy this is a heavy knife.
Yeah.
I don't think you're sharp enough to cut my head off.
No. That's the whole point.
You stupid American. You think you know everything.
This is a warning to Western countries who try to step up to the caliphate. We will run the world, and we will kill any American... What? Allah damn it!
Sorry.
Wrong set! I'm trying to do a beheading video here. For the love of Allah. Okay. Back to the video.
Light bulb went out. Hold on. Get it back on. All right, there we go.
The shadows don't match. People are going to find out. They keep putting it into articles. We have to read what they're saying. It makes sense.
Let me try this. Does that work? Does that look better? Or that? 1, 2. 1, 2.
This is so frustrating. Now we will kill the infidel. You have to make them believe this. ISIS! The caliphate!
I find your lack of faith disturbing. disturbing.
We know we're under attack! We know it! We're taking the conditioning!
2015 is almost here, and with it
All
comes
right.
those new...
So there you have it, a rather humorous little satire, but it does point out that you have the ability very, very easily to create a video that appears to be real, but if you look closely, you have a problem if you don't get the shadows just right. And it's really more than that. I mean, over and over and over, we've been seeing these, and there is, what can you say? I mean, they can do so much with special effects. You have to be careful about these things that are shown to us. You have to remember, of course, the Osama bin Laden videos that were so amateurish and so phony that whoever was putting them, it was probably the CIA, was putting them out, and people kept debunking them and saying there's clearly not a real Osama bin Laden video. The reality, of course, was that Osama bin Laden was actually dead. He died in 2001. But for years afterwards, and he would say these goofy things, like commenting on current events that were going on in the world, the United States, give his little 2 cents worth, just to keep him alive in people's minds, so that they could eventually get around to killing him when they were good and ready. And eventually they stopped making the videos entirely, and they just went to the audio tapes. And of course they have voice recognition software, and those who checked on it very easily were able to tell that this was not Osama bin Laden's voice. And I found it interesting when I would read these articles about these audio tapes, because every time one was released, there would be a little article about it in the New York Times. And they would say something like, well, yes, Osama bin Laden released a tape. Big, headlines, reasonably good headlines in the lower fold, let's say, of the front page. New tape from bin Laden. I'd say, yeah, he talked about this, he released an audio tape, he talked about that, he talked about that. And at the bottom of the article, it would always say, this tape has not been authenticated yet. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, why would they talk about this in the New York Times if it's not even authenticated yet? They don't even know if it's really him. But, well, I would think to myself, okay, well, I'll just wait around and maybe, because I used to read the New York Times every day assiduously from almost cover to cover, the whole thing. And I would look for, okay, let's get the follow-up article in which it is authenticated. But guess what? There wouldn't be any other article about the audio tape. You'd never hear anything about it again. So you'd never know whether it was authenticated or not. But, hey, just move along, keep moving, nothing happening here, nothing important. Just the next 24-hour news cycle is in full swing here. Something else exciting is happening. Look at that, don't look at this, don't look at this. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Just don't think about anything too deeply. Just sort of skip over events very lightly. Touch this, touch that, touch that. Read the headline, maybe read a couple of lines and move on to something else. Not enough time, got to keep working, got to work more than 40 hours a week, got to get another job, 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week, just to keep food on the table. Meanwhile, the government is telling us that everything is getting better. We're out of the recession. Everything is getting great. The inflation is really low. In fact, it's almost non-existent. And look how high the stock market is. Wow, incredible. We have so much to be thankful for. We're also much more prosperous, and everything is going great. The only problem with that is that most Americans don't have money in the stock market anymore. They don't have any money to save in a bank, much less invest in the stock market. And even if they did, they wouldn't want to take the chance of losing that money, because most people are fully aware that a major correction is due at any time, like happened in 2000 and 2008. The correction in the stock market is part of the business cycle that they've established through their corrupt and unwise and incompetent practices over many, many, many years, having to do with the Federal Reserve creating money to pay to give to the banks at almost zero interest, or zero interest, virtually zero interest, to pay their debts, to pay their bad debts, their gambling debts, essentially, gambling with your money and my money, and they are all, that Federal Reserve is all that's keeping the financial and economic system in some semblance of liveliness. These banks are now called zombie banks, many of these banks, by the insiders, by the economists, by the other bankers. They're called zombie banks because they would not be able to survive, because they're only appearing to be alive. That's the undead. They're really already dead, but they're being kept alive artificially. They don't make money. They buy their own debt. They financialize their debt. In other words, they buy it back. They put out they buy each other's bad loans, bad investments, and this is how they make themselves look viable, and they really aren't viable. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, those in control are changing the rules of the game for the American people, so that it will, when push comes to shove, when the game of musical chairs stops, when the music stops and there aren't enough chairs for everybody, the people who will not have the chairs will be out. And those people will be the American people. They will be those people who have money in banks, who will lose their money, because the banks are no longer required to return the depositor's money if the bank goes down, if the bank fails. It used to be that the first people who would get their money would be the depositors, and they would get in a line, whoever got in there. We saw that in 1929, the crash. People would line up outside the bank, and the banks would be handing out all the money that they had to the depositors. But there was never enough money to pay all the depositors, because that's not how banks work, unfortunately. They are not repositories of the funds of the depositors. They are essentially gambling institutions. They're speculating on all kinds of different money-making schemes, trying to make a profit. They're using your money to make a profit for themselves, in which you will get no benefit whatsoever from it. It used to be that at least you could get a fairly reasonable interest rate from a savings account in a bank. But now you don't even do that. You don't even get that little crumbs, the little crumbs of money from a savings account. Now you could buy the secured, the higher level of security and get a higher interest rate. In other words, you put your money in, you can't take it out for a year, you can't take it out for 5 years or whatever, and that's supposed to secure you a better interest rate. And there was a time when people actually had enough money saved that they could live on the interest just from the savings that they got with the bank, and that was a pretty good deal for them. I have friends who were able to secure a lot of money, and they thought they were going to be able to retire on that interest from the savings, but it's not working out so well for them because the interest rates are so low they can't live on them, and they're having to eat away at their savings, and this is not good. This is not good. So we can say, well, America appears to be better than other countries. America is better than Europe. Is it? Is it really? Or is it that we just have the dollar? We have the dollar, and it is good for Americans, at least for now, that many, many people around the world believe in the dollar and the security of the dollar, the stability of the dollar. It's as, you know, the dollar has been around for a long time. And people tend to believe that it will continue to be around for a long time. But inevitably, the dollar must fail because the Fed is using it to pay the debts. And this is why people like Ron Paul and others, Joseph Stiglitz, believe that we need another way to go. This is also why people are choosing, the savvy young people especially, are choosing the alternative to the dollar, like Bitcoin, the electronic dollar, the untraceable dollar that has no physical existence at all, but is just an agreement, essentially, between the two parties or whoever is involved, the three parties, whatever, who are involved in using that electronic currency. And they can make transactions just by keeping very strict accounting to tell, and that's how they, using the powerful computers that we have today, this is possible, and it's a new step up from the kind of paper, the false paper, not false, but the alternative paper currency that was used in, for instance, various towns and cities in small countries around the world. There have been many alternative local currencies, and it's perfectly legal as long as you don't pretend that your currency is a dollar. It can't look like a dollar. So they usually make them different color, and they have different images, and they call them something else. And so, but now we've reached the next step, and the Bitcoin phenomenon is very safe because there's no, at least it supposedly is safe. There's no entity, outside entity, that can come in and rob those dollars out of a safe, because there is no safe, because it's all electronic. And so you get on your Bitcoin account and you find out how much money is in your Bitcoin account. And then if you want to buy something with your Bitcoins, you contact another person who also accepts Bitcoins, a businessman, a business who realizes this is a good way to avoid using the dollar, which is getting more and more shaky. And then that businessman will sell you something, and that money, that Bitcoin currency, will be deducted from your account and added to his account. And so you can see how that works. And really, this is the essence of what a currency is. It's an artificial and simplified way of bartering using a agreed upon symbol. It's a metaphor for the actual wealth, for the natural resource, for that asset, whatever that would be, that you're trading. You're trading the symbol, the metaphor, instead of the actual item. Now, some people believe we should go back to the old way, which was, in other words, you trade the wealth itself. You pay with actual wealth. When you buy something, you lay down that gold coin on the table, or whatever it is you want to trade. You trade a bag of corn for a new hat, or something like that. You know, a sack of corn, or potatoes, or whatever it is you have. Or, you know, you have a horse, you need a cow. Another guy has a cow, needs a horse. You switch, you trade, and that's one way in which your inflation will be avoided. You will not have inflation at all on that system. And that's the old way. That's the way it was for probably who knows how many hundreds of thousands of years, pre-recorded history. Unless you of course believe that we may have had in the past an enormous worldwide high-tech civilization that destroyed itself, or was destroyed, maybe by a natural catastrophe, worldwide catastrophe, that knocked the human race back to the level of cave dwellers, essentially. And then we've had to build ourselves back up over the last 5,000 to 10,000 years. But really, you know, even if it's 10,000 years, you could say that maybe we have records stretching back to, or some kind of a trace of civilization stretching back 7,000 to 8,000 years. That's not a very long time when you consider that man has been on the planet in the form of Homo sapien, us, essentially identical to us, for a minimum of 150,000 years. From before the last ice age. And many people believe that there may have been a pre-ice age advanced civilization on this planet. This is very interesting. And there are archaeological artifacts that have been found that are considered by mainstream archaeologists to be anomalies. And they simply disregard them because it is unthinkable to them and goes against their theories of evolution completely that humans may have actually devolved over a period of thousands of years to a bottom rung point, and then had to fight our way, or work our way, evolve our way back up to where we now are. If we indeed think we actually are evolved, have we evolved? One has to wonder if we're better now than we were then. In some ways we are, but in many, many people on the planet live in a very primitive way, in a tribal way, in a way that is in which they don't have what we would consider civilized amenities. They don't have electricity, they don't have plumbing, they don't have sanitation, they don't have access to quality food or enough food. They don't have modern health care. Their earnings are something like $1.50 a day. 1.5 billion people live under $1.50 half a day approximately. And I think then you have to go a lot more billion people when you say how many people make over or under $2 or $2.50 a day or something like that. But the numbers are actually quite staggering of how bad it is. And this is not necessarily that these people are primitive because they've not evolved, but they've been forced to live a primitive lifestyle because of the depredations that have been made upon them by the colonial powers, by war, by secret destabilizing forces like the CIA and all its sister so-called intelligence organizations around the world that are linked very closely. I mean, we saw the Charlie Hebdo attack that happened the other day, last week. And again, another situation in which very sketchy things are going on. Extremely sketchy. I showed you last week the video of the police officer getting shot, the French police officer, on an empty street in the middle of Paris, very busy city. And I showed you that the guy in the mask, the ski mask, that so-called terrorist, who supposedly is now dead, shoot him, but yet you could see either the actual bullet or the blank, because something does come out of these guns, ricochet off the pavement, not from his head, but beside his head, near his head, not that near even, actually, beyond his head. And so he knew where the camera guy was, and he may have shot the rifle just maybe a few inches away from his head. But from the angle, it looks like the guy got shot. And there's no explosion. Now, the bullet of an AK-47 is not going to do that. It's simply not going to do that when it goes through your head. It's not going to just kill you, and that's it, and no blood, and no explosion of brain matter out the back. It's not going to happen. But in that photo, in that video, you can clearly see that that is not what happened to that French policeman at all, that he was definitely not shot in the head and killed. And this calls the whole show that they're putting on into question, the whole so-called terrorist attack. But we'll never know, because the two men who supposedly did it, the two brothers, the two dummy brothers who were like uneducated, working class guys, and yet pulled off this attack in broad daylight in the middle of Paris, not a suburb, very urban looking, in this office of the satirical magazine. But I would say a team of professionals went in there and did that. Not these two guys. They're patsies. And we have to remember, the use of patsies is not something that was thought up by the CIA or the Mossad or the French intelligence agencies. But it goes way back, way back. It's just standard procedure. It's a mob thing. It's a criminal thing. And we know now that the CIA works very closely with the mob. And I was just looking at a documentary about the JFK assassination, and yes, the mob very clearly was involved. And the shooters were not CIA men. That would be very bad. They were hired gunmen, hired by the mob, which was working with the CIA and other agencies in order to kill the President of the United States. There were several agencies, several entities, and groups of very wealthy, powerful men who wanted John Fitzgerald Kennedy out of the way. He had managed to make enemies of a very large number of people, including Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was a very corrupt, opportunistic, murderous political figure of his time, notorious in Texas, very unsavory reputation, had a hitman, his own fixer, whose name was Malcolm Wallace, a psychopath who had a PhD and actually taught college. This is the story that I keep reading, that his fingerprint was found in that room in the book depository that Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly shot the president out of. Why was he up there? You know, what part did Lyndon Baines Johnson play? The famous statement by the mistress of Johnson, the young woman, not Lady Bird, not his wife, the mistress, when the night before the assassination, he went to the big party with the oil men in Houston, in Dallas, and he came out of a secret meeting in a room, and he went up to his mistress and he took her by the shoulder and he said, "Those SOBs will never embarrass me again after tonight, after tomorrow. After tomorrow, those SOBs will never embarrass me again." And that is a promise, not a threat. And she thought, what is he talking about? But then the next day she found out, because Kennedy was dead. So they told him the night before. He probably suspected, but he didn't stop it. He wanted to be president. He was a very ambitious politician. And he tried to, I think he might have felt that maybe it would be worth it if he could do something good for the country. And he started his war on poverty right away. And I think he was trying to assuage his guilty conscience. But then he got caught up in the horror of the massive adventure for profit, the propaganda enterprise, the money-making enterprise that Lockheed and all the other major war makers, war manufacturing operations were into. And this is their latest scam against the American people and against the people of the world in Vietnam. Create something that out of nothing in Vietnam. Get the people afraid. Get the people thinking that those Vietnamese are going to attack us in San Francisco. They're going to be crossing the ocean. They're going to be attacking us. We'll be fighting them in the streets of San Francisco unless we stop them in Vietnam. That's literally what they said. They were going to come across the border from Mexico. Communism was going to destroy America unless we stopped it in its tracks. It's like the Yellow Peril from early in the 20th century, in the late 19th century. Oh, it's the Yellow Peril. Oh, it's the Bolsheviks. Oh, it's the communists. The Bolsheviks are the communists, but they used to call them Bolsheviks. For those folks who are younger in the audience, if I have an audience, but they use that argument to scare people, and they're doing the same thing today. To this very day, they're doing the same thing. And now the big boogeyman is Iran. For now. Yesterday I was hearing that, we could be looking at a nuclear weapon going off in an American city unless we stop Iran. It'll be the next 9/11. And the next 9/11 will be a hydrogen bomb leveling and destroying an American city. Unless we, the American people, give up their freedoms, give up their privacy, and give everything that they have to stop Iran. And I've heard Iran people, generals and things, on the radio talking, what are they talking about? We're not going to attack America. That would be suicidal. There's only one person on planet Earth, there's only one entity that would be willing to set off a nuclear weapon in the United States. And that would be those criminals who are in charge of the United States themselves. And they would get all their buddies out of that city first. And it would probably be a poor city that's on the skids anyway, and then they want urban renewal. And then they would set off that bomb there, just like they did on 9/11. They wanted to get rid of those towers. They were a white elephant. They were a problem. They were losing money on those towers. That was prime lower Manhattan real estate. And Larry Silverstein was determined he was going to join in. And when they came to him and offered him, hey, get the lease on these buildings. They're going to come down. You'll make a lot of money. He went with it. But that's the game plan, is to scare the American people. And maybe they will. Maybe they will set off a nuclear weapon. And then they will have the excuse to destroy Iran with nuclear weapons. And why would Iran do that? They'd know what would happen, but they wouldn't. No country on earth would attack the United States with anything, much less a nuclear weapon. Why would they even want to take that risk? They wouldn't. They love America in Iran, for one thing. They think American culture is wonderful. They love our clothes, they like our movies, our music, a lot of them, especially the young people. And most of the people in Iran are young. But that's not what the demonic beings in charge of this country, that's not the game they're playing. They're playing a whole different game. They look at that map and they see Iran right in the middle of the Middle East, the controlling country. You have Iran, you own the Middle East, buddy. And that's the way they want it in the future. So that's all for today. Have a great weekend. Sleep well.